That one's going to no, someone's going to. No, we will see.
You're good.
We're live.
That's good.
Good evening. And good evening to citizens, guests, council, and staff. Appreciate your being here or tuning in, as tonight we have scheduled over the Avalanche versus the Blackhawks tonight, as well as our party's precinct caucuses this evening that start at 7 p.m. So if anyone mistakenly tuned in and needs to head on somewhere else, that'll be great. Would like to call our council meeting of March 4th, 2014 together. City Clerk, let's do it.
Mayor Cernanek.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Beckman.
Here.
Councilmember Brinkman.
Here.
Councilmember Cole.
Here.
Councilmember Stallman.
Here.
Councilmember Stein.
Here.
Councilmember Veltes.
Present.
Okay, if you could please stand and join the Scouts and myself in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good.
Good, Joe.
Good, sure. All righty, how are you?
And Council, in looking at this evening's agenda, we're going to eliminate item 6A. Staff has asked to do some additional work on that. Is there any other consideration for changes in the agenda? Seeing none, we now have the minutes. Item 4A, which are the minutes of special meeting February 10. Minutes, item 4B, minutes of the special meeting of February 11th, and item 4C, minutes of special meeting of February 12th. Any comments, adjustments needed there? Those are approved. Minutes 4D, which are the minutes of our regular meeting of February 18. Any comments? Those are approved. And item 4E, minutes of our study session on February 18th. Nothing, so we're good. No guest citizens tonight, no scheduled public presentations, but we will move to the unscheduled public presentations. They are limited to 4 minutes. They are an opportunity for any citizen to express opinions or ask questions regarding city services, council policies, or other matters of community concern that are not part of the scheduled agenda. Generally, an immediate response should not be expected. Typically, issues are referred to city staff for follow-up information or research and are then reported back to council and the individual that initiated the comment or inquiry. If any citizen would like to speak during unscheduled public appearances, please complete a green citizen card either before or after your presentation, and that is something that you can hand to the city clerk. The green cards are located on the table at the entrance to the council chambers. And for anyone, please step forward and state your name and address. Good evening, Paul.
Mr. Mayor and Council, happy Fat Tuesday to you all. Just a couple comments.
Address, please, though, Paul.
Oh, address, 236 West Delaware Circle, Littleton, Colorado, 80120.
And you are still Paul Bingham.
Oh, did I forget that too? I'm still Paul Bingham.
Thank you.
Thank you. Will get me all lined out here. Just a couple comments from the peanut gallery. Let's see, study session, and I think maybe in the meeting before that, you folks talked about streetlights. Mr. Fellman and Mr. Bloston explained the difficulties they'd been going through with Excel trying to make it such that we own our own street lights. I really salute them for doing that. I know that's tough duty and I really appreciate you doing it, and it's a super idea. The second thing I want to comment on, with all due respect to Council Member Brinkman, I think the trash thing that you folks are studying is a really bad idea. I totally agree with Councilman Valdez. We've got in our neighborhood 6 or 8 trash companies operating, each of whom has a big truck, and it is hard on the street, certainly, but Mr. Bloston takes care of that occasionally. I really don't think the city needs to be going into business that private enterprise does. I think there's zero chance that the city can do that more economically than those people that are out there in the business. I get cards frequently. I got one just 2 weeks ago from another company. Hey, come on over to our company. We'll reduce your rate a bunch. That happens frequently. There's absolutely no way the city's going to go into the trash business and save me money. The city might make some money at my expense, but no other way. That's it. Thank you kindly.
Thank you, Paul. And just my comment on the trash is I think our charge to city staff was to take a look at if there is a way to save folks money, not necessarily was it a carte blanche to say we'd go into the business ourselves. Thank you. Anyone else? Pam?
I'm going to ask for the projector, so. So my
Name and address, we still look for that.
Thank you for reminding me. Pam Chadbourne, I live at the corner of Crestline in Nevada in downtown Littleton, District 1. My topic is information, discussion, and vote on behalf of the public and the greater good, ? This is from an old presentation I made, but I want to remind ourselves that we all work for the greater good of the city of Littleton. And we work with behavior that reflects respect for ourselves and each other. So I want to mention a few recent public actions. One of them goes back, though, to a little less than a year ago, a public hearing by the planning board where they canceled a public hearing on Broadstone. Gentlemen in the audience, most people had heard about that and didn't show up. But a gentleman in the audience had not heard, and he expected a public hearing. It was unclear to him that the public hearing hadn't been canceled. I talked to him for a long time afterwards. I agree with him. The public process that night was not clear. It was not clearly stated that the public hearing was being canceled that night, but postponed to a later date. And so he reflected his anger probably inappropriately, but there were things we could have done to make that clearer that are totally in line with the mission of a public board or commission or council, which is state the topic of the item clearly for the public as well as for the people who are on the board. That wasn't done that night, and I think that led to that particular incident. In December, there was another vote that some of us in the audience thought was different. We had different impressions of what the vote had been. On February 18th, there was a study session vote on whether we should study city waste services or not. I thought the vote was 3 for a study, 3 want more information, and 1 was no. Someone else thought it was 5 for the study, 2 against. As you make clear, it wasn't for a study. And then on February 25th, just a week ago, the study session vote was to do something related to urban renewal authorities. One council member didn't even realize the vote had been taken and asked about it at the end of the meeting. What was that vote for? What did you vote to do? Did you vote to hire the speaker's firm? Did you somehow reauthorize and refund and rename the Riverfront Authority at the meeting? Papers were passed out about something called LIFT. What was done? Did you explain to us, the public, what you did and why? I don't think so. And I'm sorry, I am angry and frustrated, but so I'll just say that. Is this really what you intend? I know most of you. I've talked to you one-on-one. I don't think this is why you ran for your offices you're in. First off, are votes during study sessions even allowed by the city charter? Other people have spoken about that. Votes during a study session, more importantly to me, inherently do not permit public input. There's no public hearing before, and there's no unscheduled citizen appearances. Is it your intention to include public comment before making significant decisions? Is it your intention to share information with the public prior to scheduling votes? I think so, but it's not happening, Council. And I urge you to change some things about what you're doing, explain to us what you're doing, clearly announce what it is you're voting on, take votes that we can understand. Thanks very much.
Okay. Thank you, Pam. Anyone else? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda item. Are you the offender?
I don't know.
Okay, not at the moment. Okay, thank you. Sorry about the static on that. The consent agenda items can be adopted by a simple motion. All ordinances must be read by title prior to a vote on the motion. Any consent agenda item may be removed at the request of a council member. Reminder that item 6A is not on the agenda for tonight. So item 6B is an ordinance on first reading amending sections 1-3-2 of the City Code to add a new definition for minutes. Consent agenda.
I'd like to pull it.
Okay. Councilmember Valdez. Item 6C is a resolution approving designs by Sundown and the Breckenridge Brewery map of dedication. And item 6, consent agenda item 6D is a resolution granting settlement authority to the city attorney. Looking for a motion?
Motion to approve consent agenda items C and D.
Second.
Okay. Motion and a second has been made on consent agenda items 6C and D. Council ready to vote?
Yeah, there I am now.
Okay. Got it.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Moving back to agenda item 6B, Councilmember Valdez.
Yes, I understand where we're going with videotaping it and the savings that we will definitely realize, that kind of stuff. One of the things I am concerned about, though, is the sound system that we just experienced a little bit of. I know when I go back and listen to some of the meetings or the Planning Commission or other meetings, sometimes the sound is not there or it's just really poor. Do we have a plan on how we can deal with that at all?
I'd have to look into it and get back to you and see what the issues are overall. I know we replaced some of this. I think that from a comparative standpoint, if you think about what the minutes are versus what we can hear and exact from a video, even with poor recording, we still probably have greater detail in that than we do currently. I guess I'd separate those two out and make sure that, because from a technology standpoint, an electronic standpoint, we should have good equipment. We've replaced the speakers, as you know, and we'll continue to replace the equipment ongoing. So I think you should all be able to assume from a policy standpoint that the technology and electronics will work for the purpose of recording his minutes.
Then for the city attorney then, so when we don't have sound, because technology does fail us sometimes, what are we required to do at that point?
Good question. One of the things that I think we try to point out in the memo is that we would have a process in place to continue to take notes of the meetings as they occurred, so that if we did have a technical problem that caused the video recording to be inaudible at some point or not truly reflect what happened at the meeting, we would then prepare for that meeting written minutes in the same way that we prepare them now. So that's our fail-safe, is that we would continue the process at the meeting. Wendy would be taking the notes, have the records, and if it turned out after the meeting we find out this audio or video is not really accessible, then for that meeting we would come back to the council at the next meeting with written minutes.
Okay, so city clerk or somebody will still record the meetings as the concurrently?
Yes, sir.
And then they'll only be kept if there's a technical issue then.
That's right.
Good, thank you very much.
Any other comments, questions? Councilmember Valdez,
Yes, I'd like to make a motion.
please.
Bill.
Yep, so I'm not sure I just understood. So Wendy the city clerk would still take minutes just like she's doing now? Is that what you're saying?
Well, Wendy would still take notes like she's doing now. What Wendy is doing now is not the minutes. She actually puts in a substantial amount of work
Yeah, no, okay.
after the council meeting to develop the minutes from the notes that she takes at the council meeting. So she would have the same ability to prepare written minutes if she needed to, if there was a problem with the videotape.
Okay,
Get that right?
I'll comment more after we have a motion.
Okay.
Or do we have the motion right now?
I'll make a motion if we're ready.
Please.
Okay, I move the ordinance amending section 1-3-2 of the city code to add a new definition of minutes, be approved on first reading, and a public hearing be scheduled for March 18, 2014 at 6:30 p.m. in the council chamber.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Discussion or questions?
So actually, I'll wait and comment at the public hearing.
Okay. So we have a motion before us approving item 6B. Council ready to vote?
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Thank you, Council. Moving to agenda item 7A, which is a second and final reading on ordinances as well as public hearing. It is an ordinance on second reading authorizing the Burnett Farm lease for the farms in the Littleton Englewood Wastewater Treatment Plant Biosolids Management Program. Director Bloston.
Good evening, Council. I'm going to try and make this presentation short but interesting for certain scouts in the audience. This is dealing with sewage, wastewater. In the city of Littleton and Englewood, they cooperate together with a very large sewer treatment plant located on the Platte River near Dartmouth and Santa Fe. There are two byproducts coming from that sewage. One is liquid that is discharged into the South Platte River after it has been treated to the standards required by the State Health Department. The second are solids. And those are processed biosolids, we call them, or sludge, that are actually reused, recycled, and trucked to farms that we own in eastern Colorado. We own over 6,000 acres of farmland out there, and the purpose of this lease agreement tonight is to continue the process of farming that land with various tenant farmers at the farm sites. In this particular case, Mr. Burnett passed away. His son, who runs the farms, would like to continue the lease arrangement with us for 2 more years, at which point we will renegotiate all of the leases that we have with 5 farmers throughout all of our acreage. Simplified position. If you have any questions, Council, I'll be glad to respond.
Questions? Seeing none, we will open. Oh, yes, sorry, Deb.
Charlie, has this gone to the Englewood City Council?
Yeah, actually last night.
Okay,
Their meetings are on Monday. It was last night.
and they approved it.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, open the public hearing.
Well, question too. Charlie, is it possible to correct that spelling error in that background?
Yeah, on this last separate page from this
Yeah.
page here?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
back-
we will
yeah.
have that corrected before we submit it for final compilation and all the agenda
There
package.
was, there were two
spell.
words and one should have been aware.
Right.
So, thank you.
Take care of that.
Good job, Peg.
Okay. Any other questions?
Come on, move on.
Thank you. Open the public hearing. Seeing no one on the roster, we will close the public hearing. Council, any further discussion? Are you ready to vote?
Have we a motion first?
Oh, yes, we need a motion.
I move the ordinance authorizing the
Yes.
Burnett Farm.
Second.
Okay. With a motion and a second, any further discussion? It's been a long day, sorry. Thank you.
So good.
City Clerk, you got the whole motion?
The motion, the vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries.
Thank you.
We're professionals. Don't try this at home.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Any other general business? Consideration for committees, commissions, or board matters? Let's move to reports. City Manager.
Nothing this evening, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Stein.
Nothing.
Councilmember Brinkman.
I do have a couple things on a broken iPad. At the CML board meeting last week, there was a resolution presented by, well, it was written by Denver regarding the trains. And what the resolution is everybody is somewhat aware there's been a lot of issues with the trains. There's Colorado's weighed in quite heavily on it, because particularly in some of the more rural areas where there's a lot of train noise. Fort Collins has a train that runs right through their downtown. There's also a lot of issues being raised about hazardous waste on trains and possible derailments, and then what happens. And speed of trains is another issue. So there has been some progress made on some of those issues, but one of the places where there seems to continue to be a bit of a lack is regarding hazardous materials. What we did at CML is we adopted a resolution, which is the one that was drafted by Denver, to pass along to the TIS committee when we're back in DC with NLC. So NLC will pass this along. And one of them is that the hazardous waste materials listed on board, the manifest of that stays with the train. So what we're asking is that that manifest is shared with every jurisdiction that train goes through. So the 911 dispatch centers would have that. So in the event of a problem, the dispatch in that particular area would know immediately what the contents of the train are, and then the first responders could handle that appropriately. The other part of this was new standards for tank cars, where they're asking that newly constructed and existing tank cars should be able to immediately provide accurate real-time information regarding, no wait, I'm saying that wrong, just a minute. Oh, they're asking that there be new standards applied to existing tank cars and new tank cars that are built. They're more safety, they're more secure, they've got buffers, insulation type things that would, in the event of some sort of puncture or derailment, that they would have an additional safety precaution there. So this is moved forward by CML to NLC and a number of other communities that have a little bit more of an impact of this are throughout the country are also putting through this information. So we'll see what ends up happening once it gets to the railroads.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Brinkman. Councilmember Valdez.
I have a follow-up on that, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Beckman, I know you were following some of that stuff too. Does this address some of the issues you had on?
Yeah, I think if they get specific with speed of trains and the hazardous materials carried on them, and understand and begin to deal with the relationship that a derailment has, the seriousness that the speed causes, and then the seriousness of the kinds of vehicles that carry the materials which they're talking about also, I think it begins to address the issue. What we really want to do, I believe, is get the speed down to a level where a derailment is not going to cause a major crisis. And right now, they're very unwilling, the railroads are very unwilling to regulate the speeds.
Cool, thank you. All right.
And just one additional add to that. Information can be gained about what the material is that train is carrying, but it's not timely. If something should happen where what is aboard that train isn't available, there is a facility available. Chemtrack is who the railroads use. The railroads that file what they're carrying with Chemtrack. A dispatch center can get a hold of Chemtrack, identify the train, go through that process, and figure out what's on it. But that's not timely. So I think that's part of the issue too. Is first responders need to know within moments what the issue is so that they know how close they can get or what type of perimeters they need to establish. So it's really important what Debbie's talking about.
Well, what this also is seeking to fix is that those manifests can be amended by hand on the train. So it would stop that amendment. So if in fact the train did pick up another hazardous car or something like that, that information would have to be dispatched to all the 911 centers on that route as opposed to just a handwritten change on the manifest.
Councilmember Valdez?
Yes, thank you. Attended the museum board, and they have a lot going on over there. Their exhibits coming up for this summer. They have one exhibit coming up that the Scouts may actually like too. It's going to be Bovines Are Divine exhibit, and it's going to be sometime this month. I don't have an exact date, but it's worth checking out. And they will have, at the beginning of next month, the board, museum board will have 2 new members. And the council, if you haven't noticed, the King Soopers has started to come down. So that's progressing right along. And maybe at some time, maybe not now, the city clerk can give us information on the omnibus, if any of that's benefiting anybody too. But maybe, not tonight maybe, but maybe another time perhaps. If you could, please, I'd like that. Thank you. Also, Stearns Park, as you know, I've been following that a little bit on the project that's going on the south end, especially, and with the delays and things like that. I do want to thank the city manager who responds to my questions when I email him literally within minutes. If it's more than 5, I wonder where you are. I start worrying about you. Yeah, but I really do appreciate you're getting the responses back. However, I'm not real thrilled with these responses. When they tell us they're out there working, and if it's good weather, they're going to be out there, they'll be there. It's interesting because when I go over there, and I go over there many times now, there are literally maybe 1 or 2 or nobody, just as there was this afternoon, and they said they were going to be there all this week working, weather permitting, and yet there's no work going on. And I want to make clear too, this is not a city contract. This is an urban drainage contract. So, and I know and that's why I appreciate your being involved to some degree and trying to push them along. So I've had, again, last night, some folks who were mentioning that to me again, so I want to keep on that. So I do appreciate the responses you're getting to me on that. Oh, and let's see, today as I was coming around my street on Aberdeen, the city of Littleton had their, I don't know what trucks you would call them, but they clean out the main lines. They go manhole to manhole, like about every 400 feet, and they clear out the 8-inch pipes in this case. But I wanted to give kudos to your crew out there, Charlie. They were very good. There weren't any cars coming except for me, and they made sure I didn't run into them. That'd be a mess if I did, I'm sure. But then I happened to just walk out there and just start chatting with them, and they took a few minutes just to tell me what was going on. It was kind of cool to learn a little bit about what was going on, looking at the manhole and things like that. So to the one guy that looked like ZZ Top and his masked partner there, pass it on to them that I do appreciate what they did. So thank you. That is all I have tonight. Thanks.
Councilmember Stallman?
Yeah, thank you. Three quick ones since we're piling on the trains tonight. I've had a couple of complaints from a citizen who's had the trains parked behind his house. Charlie's been good enough to follow on with both, I think, Burlington Northern and the Citizen, and essentially what we were trying to do is see if they could move the trains upstream or downstream so they weren't constantly idling behind this guy's house at 2 a.m. So, and then there's the blowing of the whistles. So that isn't overtly, doesn't raise to a CML level, but it does apparently create some issues in the neighborhoods, and just we're aware of it, and I think Charlie's aware of it, and so just wanted to acknowledge it. Secondly, per Joe Hansen, I wanted to formally welcome Littleton's newest police officer, serving in the K-9 unit, as I understand it. Name is Coda, and it's what is he, a shepherd? And wanted to see if when the training gets done, maybe you could arrange to have him brought in to introduce the council.
You want to put the suit on and check it out?
Not me. I've seen him do that. It's not a pretty sight.
You have a suit on?
Actually, my wife did. Kelly did, and literally we did the Littleton Police Academy training. The dog nailed her in the thigh. She had a bruise there for 2 or 3 weeks. It's that intense. So, but it's good, and it was the second canine unit, second dog we've got. We had 2, one couldn't continue, and then this is a replacement for that one. So terrific news there. And then thirdly, I just renew my suggestion from last year for staff's consideration that rather than truck biosolids all the way out to Bennett, that instead we bag the stuff, brand it as City Council's finest fertilizer, and try and sell it. And I think we'd make a ton of money.
Plastic bags?
Could do. That's all I've got.
Was that a motion?
No, that was a request.
Consideration.
Thank you. Councilmember Cole.
Yeah, on that canine, that is possible through an incredibly generous donation from a member of the Alumni Association of the Academy. This is a simple one. I request, and we used to be doing this because I requested it, but I noticed tonight we didn't have it. When we get documents with signatures on them on the council, in the council packet that we're formally approving, I request that the name of the person be typed under the signature line, because nobody would make out who the devil some of these signers are. And in the future, even if they're on electronically, people might want to go back and see who it was that was the city attorney or the city mayor, whoever, that actually signed. Then today, I don't know if I should say 5 or 5 and a half of us, because one person was half a day, had very nice experience, I think, learned a lot at the Rocky Mountain Annual City Summit. And a lot of wonderful ideas were presented. And I think it would benefit us to have a brainstorming session at a study session, just bouncing off things as we see that they might apply to future things in Littleton. So just while it's kind of fresh, bouncing that stuff around. City manager didn't get to go, but and Jerry didn't get to go, but it would really be helpful, I think.
Now, who's the half? Now I got to know who the half is.
Well, Bruce had to leave at lunchtime because he, had to get to work, but...
Decided to keep his job rather than attend the second half of the day.
That's why I wasn't there. I was dealing with stabbings.
Yes.
But anyway, it was really good. And then on behalf of our visitors, I don't know if you guys know, Charlie, I think I'm right on this, they could ask to have a tour of the wastewater treatment plant. They can't? Pardon? Well,
it is cool.
I think they look like the kind of folks that might like to see that. But anyway, so maybe you'll send a scout there to see whether or not the rest of you might want to see it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Cole. Mayor Pro Tem Beckman.
I have no report this evening. Thank you.
Just a couple of items that I'd like to add. Number one, at today's Rocky Mountain City Summit that Councilmember Cole mentioned, one quote that had me think of the other 6 of you was the item that governing, the job is to do it together. So thank you so much on that. Second, given your good behavior tonight, we're having no study session next week. And my apologies on possibly going a little too quick this evening. And Pam, if you have a few moments, I'd like to have a few comments with you. City Attorney.
If you're done.
Yes.
Okay. I'm not on the agenda for report usually, but I just wanted to thank the council. When I met with you individually after you had hired me, one of the things I suggested was that when you get your council packets, if you have issues with an agenda item, that it often helps to hear about those ahead of time. And on one of the agenda items this week, I think 3 or 4 of you contacted either Kristen or me or both of us about some of your concerns, and we had an opportunity to think about it more and communicate with you in preparation for the meeting. We're glad we answered your questions, but you also should know that Michael and I came far more prepared to get into it in more detail had you had additional questions tonight. So really appreciate that kind of communication in advance of the council meeting, because it helps us do our job better when we get here on Tuesday nights. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then one last item, Mayor Penn of Englewood asked me to extend the invitation for their business summit to be held on Thursday morning, May 15th, 7:30, and of course it's at the Englewood Civic Center. So, and with that, no other items. We are now adjourned.